Welcome to Asking Autistics. I'm your host, Lindsey, Brains and Spoons.
And I am your bimbo, Rebecca Ribera Bonbon.
Today, we're going to talk about autistic-coded characters and autistic specifically labeled characters in media, in television and film.
So what a lot of people don't know, if you don't know what coding is a very specific term within arts, like creating art, whether that's books, film, or television. And it has to do with using shorthand things to get a feeling of a character. So that's a very weird example, but one of the most famous examples of coding would be like queer coding, which was something that people did starting back in the 1930s with the implementation of the Hays Code, which was a censorship that all films had to go through. And there were specific rules that they had to follow in order to be certified with the Hays Code. And one of those rules was that you weren't allowed to show queer characters in film or television. And so in order to continue telling stories that involve queer characters, they would put in all of these subtextual clues to say that this person is queer, whether that's through subtle dialogue hints, or whether that's through the way they dress or things that they talk about, that kind of stuff. That's queer coding.
And we see that in even later eras. Very much in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of these almost gay uncle-coded characters that were just more flamboyant, like, oh my gosh, I just flew in. Boy, are my wings tired, arms tired, things like that. It was just the more flamboyant characters would hint at things, but were never explicitly labeled.
Exactly, because the Hays Code did not allow it. However, speaking of the 60s, fun fact, there was actually one film that wound up actually making a big splash in theaters despite not being approved by the Hays Code. And that is a very famous movie called Some Like It Hot, which, if you don't know what that movie is, it stars Marilyn Monroe, and it is about two men who they're musicians and they witness a mob hit. So in order to go on the run from the mob, they dress up like women and join an all-women's band as they travel across the country trying to run from the mob. One of my favorite things about that movie is its ending, because both of these two men fall for Marilyn Monroe's character, Sugar Cane. Only one of them gets with her. The other has been continuously pursued by this working class guy who is in love with him, thinking that he's a woman. And so in the end of the movie, he's sitting there and he's like, no, listen, I'm going to tell you, we can't get married at all. And the guy's like, why not? And he's just like, well, I'm a man. And the other guy's response is, nobody's perfect.
Love that scene.
That's the ending. That is one of, and that's the reason why it was not approved by the Hays Code. And they stuck to their guns with that. And they're like, you know what? No, it's good. We like it. And they did.
It's cute and it's fun.
It is. And that is one of the films that is credited with killing the Hays Code, because people realized that you could still be successful as a film even without it. But the legacy of coding, especially queer coding, did continue on after that. Only now it's something that is oftentimes really unintentional due to us leaning into implicit biases that we may not know that we have. Like an example of an unintentional coding, especially when it comes to queer coding, a lot of Disney villains are queer coded. They are they follow those same flamboyantly things that you were talking about.
There's archetypes, there's tropes that we start to see that if you are a literary person or you have a film and television background, you can recognize those archetypes as being coded that way. And what we have started to see in the last few decades is, coding and disability coding. And that's something that obviously we want to talk about.
Yeah. And sometimes there are examples of coding, autism coding in particular, that I do think are intentional, but can't be labeled as autistic for good and bad reasons. Like there are some of them that are like, oh, you know, I'm like trying, like it seems to me that they're very clearly trying to say and hint that this person is autistic, but because of the rules of that universe, they can't explicitly state it. One of my personal favorites from books is I'm literally going to pull it up because it's right here, Avatar Kyoshi from the Avatar Kyoshi book, which is fantastic. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But they continuously like hint at Avatar Kyoshi doing autistic things. Like, for example, she constantly has to remind herself what face she's supposed to make because she does not inherently know how to move her face. She also does not understand social interactions with people. People are constantly telling her that she's taking something too literally, or that that the person that she thinks hates her is actually fine with her. She takes almost everything literally. It's so funny. And also within the world, she is referred to as disabled. Now that has to do with like the way that she bends. Like she can bend an entire mountain. She can lift a mountain of rocks, but she can't lift a pebble, which is why she has her fans. But like they have all of these hints at there that she's autistic, but they can't say that because in this world, there is no word for that.
Right. It's a fantasy world.
Exactly.
We see that there's characters that like we jokingly say that the autistic community has claimed in the Marvel movies, in the Marvel universe, okay? They don't have officially autistic labels on characters, but we see Drax is, just the stereotypical for a lot of folks. They see a kinship there in the very literal way that he interprets language and the world and idioms, all of those things, that he's very just like direct and blunt and doesn't grasp innuendo.
Drax and Mantis both are the two that like are the most relatable. And that's actually a super common one that I've noticed as somebody who spends their time being annoying about film and television in my everyday life. And I tell this to all of the people in my filmmaking classes. If you have an alien or a robot character in your project, it's probably going to be autistic coded in some way, because the ways that that most writers and most creators of media, the ways that they interact with a robot or an alien in their projects, oftentimes, this happens especially if you're doing one of those ones where the alien or the robot has to learn what it means to be human.
Yes.
That means you have to define what it means to be inhuman. And those inhuman traits are almost always autism.
And it's also the autistic experience. Part of that journey for autistic people is figuring out the rules of the world around us, because our natural inclinations are different. They diverge from what is neurotypical, from this majority of society. And so the experience of learning the basic rules and etiquette of situations that the average person thinks everybody knows, that it should be super basic. Like it's intuitive. For autistic people,
for
it is
you,
not
maybe.
intuitive. Right? Yeah. For you, it's intuitive, not for us. And so that feeling like an alien, feeling like you are not quite as human as other people around you, and trying to learn to assimilate and to do these things and understand these things, that in itself, is the autistic experience.
Yeah.
And so, yes, a lot of us relate to alien characters, to Spock, to Drax, to all this. Yeah.
See, I don't relate to Spock because I don't relate to anything that flies on a metal pizza in the sky. I am a diehard Star Wars fan. Star Trek is for heathens like my family who is all obsessed with Star Trek.
Them both. I am a equal opportunity sci-fi aficionado.
Yeah. With that, who in media, like what alien or robot in media is your autistic fave?
I think it ends up being one of those things where I gravitate to those characters in almost every show.
Yeah, same. No, same.
I, though, have the ADHD combo, you know, that we jokingly say that I'm the manic pixie dream autistic. So I tend to see myself and my autistic experiences in the weird, but excitable, enthusiastic character. So for me, in the latest Star Trek, Discovery, there's a character, Tilly, and she is an engineer, but she finds it difficult to make friends with people or to deal with superiors because she just is so blunt in her language and she overshares. And so there's a lot of different issues that she has with communication and with, you know, hierarchies, all kinds of things that for me fit that autistic ADHD experience. And so, yes, she's a human, but gosh, I love Tilly as that character. Sorry, I'm just like going to go off about Star Trek.
No, you should. You should.
And so for me, as a female autistic person with the comorbid ADHD, yeah, a Mantis character, Tilly character, that's who I'm going to gravitate towards more than the stoic, robotic.
That one is just not you. Like you have like the hyperlexic, like talks a lot kind of autism, as opposed to the I just say as few words as possible autism.
Yeah, I'm the Penelope Garcia from Criminal Minds.
I love that.
Autistic, okay? I'm the Abby Shudo from NCIS autistic character. I mean, that's what we see this. I've already even mentioned it. The manic pixie dream girl archetype is a trope. That is a autistic ADHD female character.
Yeah. I cannot tell you how many times that I have, like, if I'm wearing my glasses and I start talking, and like if my hair is curled and I'm wearing glasses and I'm talking, everyone's like, is that Zooey Deschanel? And I'm like, I look literally nothing like her. You are saying, is that an autistic person? That is what you are saying. Just be honest about it. You're clocking my tism from like a million miles away.
I mean, Jessica Day is that classic archetype. I mean, and the clumsiness and the confusion that a lot of us have dyspraxia, okay? Like we've had friends go through, and we've probably made videos before where you go through every single personality or physical trait of these characters, and it fits with not only the autistic criteria, but also the lived experience of most autistic people. And so, yeah,
it does. I always say, like, for me, my go-to autism comfort person, aside from Jessica Day, because literally, like, when New Girl came out, I had so many of my friends texting me, they made a show about you. And I was like, what do you mean they made a show about me? And they're like, no, they made a show about you. And I watched them and I was like, okay, you know what? Fine, whatever. That's true. But I don't like you mentioning it. But my go-to, my comfort autism character that was autism-coded character is actually from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. For those who haven't seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, first off, let me just say, shark you, Joss Whedon. Okay. Shark you. Anyways, for those who haven't seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there is a character in there named Anya. Anya is a vengeance demon which like literally her whole thing is that she's a demon who comes to girls after they've gotten broken up with, who want vengeance on their ex-boyfriends. And so she casts their vengeance wish, and then everything goes horribly wrong for them. But when doing this in Sunnydale, Buffy winds up like accidentally trapping Anya there as a human. She's no longer a demon. She's now just a human in high school along with the rest of them. And so she goes from like villain of the week to just one of the gang very quickly because she's trying to learn how to be human now that she's stuck that way permanently. And she is so autistic in the ways that they're trying to teach her how to human, because she's constantly saying rude things. And they're like, Anya, you can't say that. That's rude. And she's like, but it's true. And like one of my favorite moments, and like this was the moment for me that she really became my autism comfort character. Spoiler alert for season 5 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy's mom dies very suddenly from an aneurysm. And the episode that they're dealing with that, you know, they're all gonna like go and comfort Buffy, but they're all dealing with the fact that they lost somebody who is so close to them. And Anya asks inappropriate questions. And she asks, are we going to see the body? Is that what's going to happen? And Willow, who is Buffy's best friend, gets upset with Anya and is like, how could you even ask such a thing? Like, is that what is wrong with you? And Anya goes on this monologue and she's like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand how Joyce was here one minute and now she's not. And I don't understand why she can't just not be dead anymore. I don't understand why she can't just get in her body and be alive again. I don't understand it. And no one will explain why. And that moment for me was just the epitome of how I feel interacting with the world. Because like when my best friend's mother died, I had that exact moment, that exact thought process of like, okay, can somebody please explain to me why she can't just get back in that body and be alive? Like, can someone explain to me why? Can somebody explain to me why everyone is crying? I don't get this. And that was just the moment for me where I was just like, that's perfect representation of autism.
Yeah. And that like we've said, the alien experience, the fish out of water experience, that is intrinsically autistic coded. And so whereas I would say the non-autistic, the allistic people don't tend to go through media and say that's an autistic character like we do, but we recognize these things. We see a bit of ourselves in these characters or a bit of a family member, things like that. And so it's interesting that I would say a majority of the actually autistic community, we will name a lot of the same characters, or we will use these, like I said, these archetypes, the alien, the robot, the fish out of water, the manic pixie dream girl, to explain our experiences. But I would say that the holistic world, they label official autistic characters in ways that don't feel true and that it feels very false to us. And even if they are basing these on, you know, an outside view of someone that they know, that's the biggest thing. It's the outside view. They're like, well, I know an autistic person and I see them have meltdowns and I see them count things and I see them flap their hands or stim some way. And they base the characters solely on this outside appearance.
Sometimes they also get it wrong. Like, I can't tell you how many times people have told me like, well, you're not autistic because I've seen Rain Man and that's what autism looks like. And what's funny
I've seen The Good Doctor. That's what autism looks like.
Dustin Hoffman's character in Rain Man is actually based off of a real person. Like, they based the entire film and disorder around a real person. And he's not even autistic.
Mm-hmm.
He's not. He's got an entirely different developmental disability that is not autism. And everyone has just homogenized those traits with autism instead of actually like looking at their own internal biases and being like, maybe I'm the one who's in the wrong.
Yeah. And I think that is why a lot of autistic advocates and get really upset when we see new films and TV shows and stuff that, again, are basing their autistic characters on around these concepts. Yeah, the outside perspective and not the internal experience. And it makes such a difference. And it doesn't matter how many people you observe, it's
You
still
never get it unless you've experienced it.
yeah, it's still not the real internal experience. And so that's why characters that are autistic coded, but not officially autistic, ring more true to so many of us. And what has been even more interesting is some of our favorite, more recent, in the last decade or so, autistic coded characters were written or performed by people who then later find out they themselves are autistic. And that is where a lot of it came from.
I can't share the name of this very famous performer, but a very famous actor was somebody who saw one of my videos reviewing their performance as a character who I said was autistic coded. And that actor reached out to me on Instagram and was like, hey, so it's funny you say this. I actually just got diagnosed with autism. I'm not open about it, but I just got diagnosed with autism. So it's no wonder I was so good at playing that character. And I was like, I smelled that from a mile away.
And I think, well, and that came out with your favorite and one of my favorite, we called our emotional support autistic, is Abed from the show Community, and played by Danny Pudi. And the writers of the character put a lot of themselves into the Abed character, and then later on got an adult autism diagnosis.
Which also, listen, Danny Pudi, most people, I do not give the pass to be an autistic person performing an autistic character, because I believe that autistic characters should be played by autistic actors only. Danny Pudi, you get a pass.
Yeah.
You get the pass. I will. You're the exception to the rule, okay?
Well, and I think a lot of that is because of the writing, and also that he didn't play the character as a stereotype. It was very tongue-in-cheek and very, like, again, real, but that was because the internal experience was being put out there on screen. And yeah.
I still love that line in the Christmas rap where it's like, on the spectrum, none of your business.
Yes.
Like, they knew what they were doing.
They did. I mean, well, then there's another character that's very famous where this character meets quite a bit of the criteria for autism, but was not officially labeled autistic, even though I would say society at large, most people use him as the standard for autism, and that is Sheldon Cooper. I think it's hard. It is hard sometimes. I have lost followers. I have lost mutuals over my videos and discussions of Sheldon Cooper. It's you wouldn't possibly know this if you are not autistic, but Sheldon Cooper's a divisive, he is a hot button topic for the autistic community. Because on one hand, I would say a lot of people see a little bit of themselves in there because, again, he does meet a lot of the criteria for autism.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it is a negative portrayal. And they didn't want to say this. They avoided it for so long, but it has come out in different ways, in different, unofficial interviews or even some official ones, that they did base Sheldon's character on an autistic person, but didn't want to say that because they knew if they ever, that's when they say, oh, my mother had me tested and I'm fine, that line.
Okay, so that irritates me because that's them just trying to give themselves a pass to make fun of autism. They're like,
yes.
Oh, we can't make fun of autism if we're not saying autism.
Exactly. And that was the thing. They felt that if they gave Sheldon an official diagnosis, then it wasn't all of a sudden, but people would know all of a sudden that they had been punching down the whole time. And their strategy of comedy, very much the writing of that show, is punching down. Okay?
It is. It's punching down on women and it's punching down on disabled people.
Nerds in general. Like, that was the thing. And I as a early watcher did not see that. It was later on going back and watching things that I go, this feels icky. This doesn't feel good anymore, because you're realizing all the time that the people, these characters that I related to, are the butt of the joke every time.
And then, like, you know, leaning in later, like, I still hated it, but I didn't, like, it wasn't connected to the autism aspect of it, but I just hated that show with a passion. Like, just, it was never for me.
To be fair, if you do like that show, that's okay too.
Yeah,
Like,
this is just my
unfortunately, yeah, we both have strong feelings about it, but I feel like these are very legitimate critiques, and and there's a lot of people who have those critiques, and it's valid. Like, we make a lot of valid points. But again, I can see where autistic people in particular, change is hard. And if you gravitated towards a character like Sheldon, especially like you said, when you were younger, like growing up, it's really hard to hear that this is not a good portrayal or this is problematic.
Yeah. And here's the thing, and I say this all the time on my YouTube channel when I talk about film and television, because, you know, most of the stuff that I talk about is, most of the stuff that people talk about in film and television is why it's bad. I try not to, but I do sometimes. And one of the things that I want everyone to hear and really internalize, other people not liking something you enjoy is not an attack on who you are as a person. Saying there are criticisms to be had about something that you enjoy does not mean that those criticisms apply to you. And it doesn't mean that you're bad or negative for not seeing them yourself, especially when it comes to problematic media. You are allowed to like things, and people are allowed to share why they don't. And that does not mean that they inherently don't like you. And I think that that's like what a lot of people get like caught up with in their minds. They think that like because we identify with these characters, because like that's just how you watch media. You know what I mean? Like that's how you enjoy media, is you find a character that you identify with. You care about what they're going through because you see yourself in that situation. So when people criticize these films, they're like, oh, that's a criticism of me. I'm the one who killed all those younglings. And like, no, you didn't kill the younglings. Anakin Skywalker did. Like, saying that Anakin Skywalker killed younglings does not make you a bad person for liking Anakin Skywalker. I have so many villains that I like. I am a villainous bitch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm a Loki stan.
Listen.
I think that is a wonderful point, is that just because people criticize a character, that doesn't mean they are criticizing you as a person. And that's so important, because I can, at this point, because both of us have a background in literary criticism, in film critique and things like that. And so
we're cringy theater kids.
Yeah. We can look at a character that we both relate to and have been called, you know, Jessica Day, the new girl archetype, both of us have been in a lot of those experiences and are like, oh gosh, wow, I really see myself in this person. However, there are parts of that show and there are things that she did that were really problematic. There's seasons that I can't watch because I'm like, this is stalking and this is not something that we should be making light of on television. So I can have critiques of that. Okay. I can go, ooh, this part and these things are not good. They're problematic. But at the same time, still say, oh gosh, when she talks about Lord of the Rings all the time and it's inappropriate and the people around her are like, WTF, mate. Okay. I can relate to that too.
Like being told not to bring off Gandalf on a first date.
Right? That's right. I mean, both of us have had those experiences where we go on a first date and we end up talking about serial killers or giving a lot of bird facts to people. I don't know anyone who has ever done that.
For me, it's go on a date and I'll share every single bit of information that I have about Disneyland or Five Nights at Freddy's. so, because special interest brain.
So these characters are important for different reasons, and they can be both good and bad. And then some of them are just really bad. You've done some really good videos and critiques of Atypical. I have heard other people make some really great critiques of Atypical. I'll have to put it down, but there's a book called We're Not Broken that I have been reading by...
I think I have that one. I think I just got it.
It's so good. I highly recommend this. Like, I am hoping that we could get the author on the podcast someday. This book is phenomenal at giving you different perspectives of autism, but also the history, the social political history of autism as a disability and the different barriers there have been, but also the portrayal of autism in media and things like saying, okay, Atypical, that show features an autistic character officially. The whole show is about that. But he does a lot of problematic things. And the portrayal also doesn't ring true to a lot of autistic adults, again, because of these problematic things that happen, where he is violent towards women multiple times. And it's brushed aside as being like, oh, but he's autistic. He doesn't know any better. And that is a dangerous precedent to set. And it's something that in the autistic community, we talk about a lot, that like autism is not an excuse for violence or for misogyny or anything else.
One thing that irritates me so much when it comes to Atypical is the amount of people who infantilize Sam, not only in the show, but also in the fan base, because I have talked at length over how violent and dangerous his behavior is. Like in the first season alone, he stalks his therapist, breaks into her house, leaves a chocolate strawberry, throws a girl off a bed, locks his girlfriend in a closet, and pulls a girl by the hair because it was just hitting him in the face. And when I talk about that online and I'm like, autism is not an excuse for violence, everyone's like, and I'll say, like, I'm an autistic person. I would never do these things. And everyone's like, well, you don't have as high of support needs as him. And I just, one, don't assume my support needs. And for two, what do you mean he has high support needs? This is a man who can communicate, who can like verbally communicate in a way that is functional with holistic society. He can communicate back and forth. He may still struggle with that, but he can do it. He doesn't experience verbal shutdown to the point where he needs an AAC device. He, yes, has sensory issues, but he has the abilities to manage them to the point where he has worked on replacement behaviors for certain experiences. And in the final season, he lives on his own. He has his own apartment with a roommate, but he still lives on his own and has a relationship and a job and college. All of these things.
And is successful in all of those things.
So what do you mean he has higher support needs?
Right. I think that is also something that is, I don't know, a hot button item. Another thing that is a very triggering topic is taking film and television characters and using that as our gauge for real autistic support needs. Because what we know in the real world, in the disability community, most disabilities are what we call dynamic, which means that they are not the same from day to day, from situation to situation, from this season to another season. They can change. Our abilities, when we say dynamic, it means that they change. One day I may be capable of completing a whole bunch of tasks and being the employee of the month and excelling at whatever you've asked me to do. And then on another day, I may have a meltdown from that sensory overload, and I do not have the capability to perform any of the tasks that you have seen me do before. Yep. And as an autistic person, as an ADHDer, and as a person with multiple chronic illnesses, so, multiply disabled, it's not always predictable. And I don't have control over that. I wish I did. I think all of us wish we did. That is the biggest thing in our lives, is if we had control over these things, it would make things a lot easier, but we don't. And I think that is something that I'm still waiting to see in film and television, is that accurate portrayal of dynamic disabilities and fluctuating support needs. I think it's because it's so nuanced that that's really hard to write.
You just have to see autistic people as human. And that's what irritates me so much about a lot of film and television surrounding autism, or like disability in general, honestly, because it's not just autism. I hate those movies where it's like, oh, people died, so now the older sibling has to take care of the younger disabled sibling. Or like just some movie where like a non-disabled person becomes the caretaker for a disabled person.
I will say that my favorite autism portrayal, my favorite show about neurodivergence, actually is about a parent dying and the sibling taking care, is Everything's Going to Be Okay.
That's a fun one. I like that one.
Because that show casts all neurodivergent people, and all the autistic characters are played by actually autistic actors and actresses.
Yes, and the creator, who is also the star, is autistic.
But this is what, it's amazing, you guys. Like, I'm going to get really emotional about this, is that he went into the show knowing that he was ADHD and ADHDer. I, too, started watching the show knowing I had ADHD. And as he goes through a lot of different life scenarios and things with his younger sister and her autistic friends and things, he eventually realizes that he himself is also autistic. And it just presented in a different way. And the people around him start saying that, have you ever thought that maybe you're autistic? And he's going, no, I couldn't be autistic. And then he takes his sister, gives him the online assessments that a lot of us have taken. And his answers are very autistic.
Like the bird. He's like, I can think of a bird and it's got a little hat.
Right. So, and that rang true to his real life experience of writing and being on the show. And I can't think of his name, but
Joshua.
I'm so sorry.
Joshua Thomas, I believe.
Joshua Thomas, that he was ADHD and then realized he was autistic. And like, I cry. This whole episode that's going on speaks to my experience so much that and again, that show is like our magical little unicorn of a show, because it is written and performed by autistic people.
I'm pretty close friends with one of the actresses on the show, Lillian Carrier. She plays the love interest of the younger sister. Lillian is a wonderful human being, and I adore her. She was actually the one who pointed out to Josh, like, hey, that's a TISM thing.
So she was a part of his realization in real life.
She was.
She was one of those I have the radar.
And one of the things, that show in particular did one of the most powerful things, in my opinion, in the end of season 2, after he realizes that he's autistic. So before diagnosis, he has been dating this guy for like a year and a half, right? And he loves his boyfriend, but his boyfriend does not feel loved by him because they're constantly struggling to communicate with each other. And he's constantly telling the main character that he's selfish and things like that, and that he doesn't really care about anybody but himself, whereas our main character is trying very hard. So they wind up breaking up, right? And then Joshua's character gets an autism diagnosis. And when the boyfriend comes back for Kayla's Kayla Cromer's character's wedding, he finds out about the autism diagnosis. And so he tells Joshua's character, he's like, oh my God, we should get back together. I didn't know, I didn't know. And Joshua's character goes, no, I don't want to get back together. I don't think that's a good idea because those issues are not going to go away. And that, to me, even though it was really bittersweet, or for some people it was just bitter, but for me it was very bittersweet because that's something that I am like, I just say it all the time. Like, if you had issues with my autistic traits before finding out that they were autism, you're still going to have issues with those autistic traits when I don't stop being autistic.
Yes. That is something that I think, again, so many autistic people have experienced in relationships with holistic folks around us, is that all of the things that you have criticized me for, the things that you don't like about me, those are autistic traits, or in my case, ADHD traits too. But and those aren't going to change. Like, we work really hard to communicate better, to come up with some coping strategies and things. But like, if you inherently don't like or aren't, comfortable with my brain, then maybe we shouldn't, be together.
And yes, it sucks that we very rarely get to see autistic people have happy endings in film and television, especially happy romantic endings. Because like, even if you look at Atypical, which is one of the most famous ones, they also break up. Like,
and that one too, you and I know quite a few other AFAB autistics have really looked at that show and seen traits of autism in his sister and in the love interest, especially her. I looked at her struggles. Yes. And so again, like we said, we see this focus on the white male autistic, and we don't see the spectrum. We don't see the other presentations. And so for so many years, we've had to go find our representation in coded characters, in unofficial characters, because that's the place where we're seeing people of color and women and just anybody who's not a little white boy, honestly. But Elementary is a really recent show. It's a phenomenal show. I love it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things.
Okay, so as a former teacher, like, I love it so much. But there's a character on there, Gregory, and he constantly does things that are autistic-coded. They have written him in a way, I'm like waiting for them to write a season where he gets diagnosed, because he fits so much of the criteria. God, I've seen Gregory. I have always wanted to make like a whole long video about his, the autistic coded character on Abbott Elementary. And there's other things going on. There's other dynamics, but like, Gregory is a wonderful representation for like Black men to have. And so I'm like crossing my fingers that we get an official diagnosis. But even if we don't, even if he just stays as a coded character, that's still representation that we needed to see. So like, I love Abbott Elementary. I think that actually just reminded me of one of the other shows we already talked about, but that's New Girl. Is that Winston on New Girl is autistic coded. And I don't think in the beginning that was ever the plan. He's just an extra. I've listened to interviews with them, as they had the main idea of like, okay, Nick and Jess is the will they, won't they, right? But the rest of the side characters, the friends, they didn't have a strong point of view. And then as the show went on, the actors started getting more nuanced and started to also bring a little bit of themselves or people they knew, right? Wackier experiences. And they were like, I'm going to go with this. My character feels. And as this show went along, I really think, and I had this discussion with a friend of mine who was like, Winston Bishop is their autistic-coded character. Whereas Jess Day is mine, Winston Bishop is his. And I was like, so whereas I identify with Jessica Day's, that character on New Girl, he very much sees his autistic self in Winston Bishop. And I think especially when Winston struggles with things like pranks, like, and the humor of, yes, right? Is that the other people understand the dynamics, that there's this push and pull with it. And he either does it or overdoes it. He doesn't understand.
We're going to put those shavings next to him. So what, we make the room slightly dirty? Okay, instead, we make it acid and we pour it on his face.
Right. And so you see this where like Winston has to learn how to do jokes, how to do pranks, because he just doesn't have that. Winston struggles with relationships and flirting because he is too direct and also is just too kind, or he misses cues. Like there's just all these moments.
There was that one episode where he sets up a date for his cat and the girl is really into him and he doesn't realize it because he's so focused on getting the cat laid.
Yes, because that's the thing, is that a lot of us also see this where we sometimes relate to animals more than the humans around us. And Winston does that. And so, there's so many moments that, really like feel authentic, even if that wasn't their intention.
Routine.
And then Nick having, I believe they actually do at some point acknowledge his ADHD like aloud.
Nick is so ADHD.
Nick is such a perfect example of ADHD. And then it really is, that show is so neurodivergent. Like we've got Winston and Jessica and then Schmidt, it became this wonderful group dynamic.
Literally just having this conversation with my partner last night because we were watching Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec is such a neurodivergent show. Specifically ADHD and autistic.
Yes.
I mean, we've got Andy, very ADHD, okay, right off the bat. And then our Manic Dream Autistic with Leslie Knope scenario. And she's, again, there's a whole thing we could dive into the Manic Dream trope.
We probably will at some point.
About the problems and the not having autonomy and things like that. But Leslie is that hyperverbal people pleaser, overachieving autistic, that my value in society comes from how well I can plan everything around me.
Yep.
Right? And that rings true for a lot of people. And I know plenty of people who are like, oh, well, I'm the oldest daughter, and that's why I relate to Leslie. And I'm like, that's fine too. But there are definitely some moments, okay? Like Leslie is, one of our autistic representation. And then with Ben Wyatt.
And Ben Wyatt is husband goals. I know that Parks and Rec originally started off as a spinoff of The Office. And let me just say, Ben Wyatt can kick Jim Halpert's ass and how much better of a husband he is.
What's interesting is that mockumentary style of filming that The Office really brought into the lexicon and into the expectations on film. I love that style, but I don't care for the show because, again, punching down. But the shows that were inspired by that mockumentary style, Parks and Rec and Abbott Elementary, are my favorites because there's hope. There's a happiness, and the humor is not at anybody else's expense.
I've said for years is that the difference between The Office and Parks and Rec is that The Office makes fun of its autistic characters and they are always the butt of the joke. Whereas Parks and Rec, what makes it the better show is they celebrate their autistic characters. Yes. Leslie's the butt of the joke amongst like herself, but like no one ever actually puts down on her. Like most of the things
she's
they talk about with her,
she's beloved. Dwight, not beloved.
No.
Leslie, beloved.
Beloved.
I mean, that's the same. Andy, beloved. April, who is
Beloved.
like our dark Wednesday Addams autistic. Okay, you root for her. We love these people, and I think that's what makes it so gratifying for those of us who see them as autistic-coded characters and relate to that, is that then we feel loved.
And seeing people of color who are autistic in film and television is so important. Like, I know that this may seem like kind of a silly episode, which kind of is. We like talking about film and movies sometimes. I've been annoying everyone in my everyday life talking about film and television since I started.
That's what you're studying. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I have to annoy everyone else too. But also at the same time, autism representation in film and television actually does have an effect on our everyday lives. Film and television in general, even though film and TV is fake, even your reality TV shows are fake, everything on TV is fake. However, it does affect our day-to-day interactions with people to the point where people identify things based off of what they've seen in film and television. Like, for example, there was one incident in 2018, I believe it was, where somebody in a restaurant was choking. And instead of giving the choking person a Heimlich maneuver, a guy thought that he could do an emergency trachea thing just because he had seen it on like The Good Doctor.
God, and like Grey's Anatomy, all of these shows. Yeah. And so whether we realize it or not, media, television and movies, it has an impact on us. And it has a societal at large impact. And so we need to see autistic characters that are genuinely represented and played by autistic actors and written by autistic writers. But at the same time, we also really appreciate the autistic-coded characters that are out there that exist, because that's right. For now, that's where we're getting our representation.